Senator Brad Hoylman-Sigal is a Democratic candidate for Manhattan Borough President, and if you win in November, you would be the first openly gay borough president in Manhattan in the history of the city. That's a big deal, especially with what's happening in Washington, and I wonder what that means to you.
Well, I take it very personally and professionally because, as you mentioned, Marcia, in Washington there are attempts to really curb the human rights of the LGBTQ population, whether it's attacks on transgender youth, which are really scurrilous in my opinion, because these are the most vulnerable young people in our society today, where we've seen rates of suicide ideation skyrocketing, in addition to hate crimes, of course, but also due to the fact that, you know, now there are some states that are even questioning my marriage and my ability to have children.
How does that make you feel? I mean, you have 2 children, you've been at a long-time marriage. How does it make you feel that they're trying to make it, you feel that that's not acceptable?
Well, part of it is painful, but part of it really fires me up and, you know, wants to do this job with all the vigor that I have, because, you know, I think as an openly LGBTQ elected official, I think I have a responsibility for the next generation of young people who want to serve the public, just as I aspire to do.
So what kind of a message are you trying to send to people about what you can accomplish in this job for your community?
Well, what I heard from voters during the election, which is what the mayoral candidates and every candidate for office heard, city council and otherwise, is that affordability is one of the top issues that we have to address, and that's deeply, deeply tied into housing. Look, more than 1/2 of renters in New York City are burdened, meaning they pay more than 30% of their income on rent. We have to address that problem head on, but in addition to that, quality of life.
Before we get to quality of life, let's talk about housing and whether you think a rent freeze is the way to go.
Well, a rent freeze is, in my opinion, has to be on the table. I strongly support it. And, you know, that'll be up to the next mayor and his appointees to determine. But we've seen that rents are skyrocketing. Look, in my district, the number of constituents who had to move out of New York City because they were being charged increases 30, 40, 50%. Now, we did pass a bill in Albany called Good Cause Eviction, and that's going to help those who are non-regulated. And I hope my office can take a big role in making certain that renters know their rights. And I want to organize tenants in that regard.
But also there's the landlord side of it, and I've interviewed a number of smaller landlords who say they have, you know, buildings that have maybe 10 apartments, 12 apartments, 15 apartments, and they say they can't afford a rent freeze. So how is there a way to do like a 2-tier system so you can take care of the small property owners who may have legitimate questions?
I agree that small landlords are small business owners and have a lot of struggles that, you know, haven't been well publicized. One of the things I want to do is to have in my office a small business navigator to help them comply with a lot of regulations that are coming out of City Hall, well-meaning, but need to be certainly understood in the terms of the small landlord.
Well, especially since, you know, you have rising costs of power, electricity, gas, etc., that they're being asked to carry, and also rising real estate taxes. So, you know, is it fair to lump all landlords into the same great big box?
No, it's not. And, you know, the landlords I often talk about are the nameless, faceless landlords, private equity firms, LLC, limited liability companies. We passed a law that hopefully will bring some transparency to those hidden landlords that often impose inordinate costs on our New York City residents.
So we also have a situation where another big issue is, dare I say it, casinos. There are 2 possibilities for casinos that have been proposed here in Manhattan, one in Times Square, one called the Avenir, which is sort of near, I guess, the Javits Center. You don't like casinos.
I'm not a casino candidate, never have been. I made that very clear. I said during my campaign, if you want a casino in Manhattan, don't vote for Brad Hoylman-Sigal. And I stand by that statement. There's also an East Side casino proposal, by the way.
That's right.
Look, I heard from voters that quality of life is one of their top concerns. If you want to exacerbate the problem of quality of life in a neighborhood, drop a casino in the middle of that. crime, traffic, addiction. Casinos feed on all of those societal problems. Look, I'm not saying that some communities don't want them, and we've seen in different parts of the city that some may, and that's why we have the Community Advisory Council set up that can effectively check the casinos and the developers and ensure that there's community participation in where a casino is sited.
So right now you are still a state senator, and you do know that there's a policy of bringing 3 downstate casinos to this area. I mean, the popular wisdom, obviously it has to be decided, but the popular wisdom is that one would go to Yonkers because they already have a racino, and one to Aqueduct, which also has a racino. That leaves one more to go someplace in the downstate area. I wouldn't say the 5 boroughs, but downstate. So where do you see that going? I mean, when you talk about the proposal in Coney Island, people don't want it. You talk about some proposals in Queens, people don't want it, although you know, there's one at Citi Field, but, you know, like, would you put 2 casinos in Queens? So where can you find space for this casino? I mean, it's a moneymaker for the state. I think it brings in like $500 million a year, each casino.
Yeah.
So isn't there a reason to do these casinos someplace?
Well, there is. I mean, it is certainly in my opinion, a kind of short-sighted way to raise revenue for the state, because look at the other side. Again, the problems that casinos bring to neighborhoods are legion. They're well documented, and those cost the public purse a lot of money too. That said, if a community strongly embraces a casino in another borough, more power to them. I think the one in Citi Field has a very good shot. After all, we amended statute in Albany to allow that casino to go forward. So I would think that one of those casinos has a much better shot than Manhattan. Last night, the theater owners in Times Square,
they don't want it.
They all lit up their marquees saying no casino in Times Square. That is a powerful message.
So but the reason I'm asking about the casinos is because they can bring in a lot of money.
Yep.
And the reason why the state needs a lot of money is because of the cuts from Washington. So there's been a reason, you know, the mayoral candidate, the one you're backing, in fact, has proposed increasing taxes on billionaires and rich people. But the thing about it is that the cuts from Washington are going to be big. So don't you need some kind of way to bring money in that doesn't involve, you know, taxes on people?
Absolutely.
Because, you know, there's a fear, and the governor says this. She says that there's a fear about migration, and if you know, the more taxes, the more people are likely to be leaving the state, which means, by the way, fewer Congress seats.
Fewer Congress seats, a lower tax base. Look, we should embrace the opportunity to have everyone contribute to services in the city. That's why it's expensive to live here. That's why taxes are expensive, because we have great societal needs. We have a social safety net that is frayed already, and we're looking at a $10.3 billion city deficit combined with the $10.5 billion state deficit by 2027, according to the state controller. So we do need new revenue streams. I'm not saying that income taxes are the only thing that we should be looking at. Look, there's a proposal to socialize title insurance and have that state run. Could bring in hundreds of millions of dollars a year. We could tax digital advertising, as other states have done, could bring in hundreds of millions of dollars a year. There are a lot of proposals out there.
We'll have to leave it right there for now, but we'll be right back. We are back with Senator Brad Hoylman-Sigal. So I want to talk to you about your Senate role now, and I want to talk to you about mayoral control of the schools. It's something that the state legislature has passed since Michael Bloomberg was in charge of the city. But now there's been the Democratic mayoral nominee, Mr. Mamdani, has suggested that we might change that. How do you feel about that?
Well, I've heard Mamdani say that he wants to bring in greater parental participation and stakeholder involvement. I firmly support that. I also heard him say that he will continue to appoint the chancellor. So, you know, I think that's a very fair balance, in my opinion. I think parents, I'm one myself, want to see some direction, and public education is one of the most essential roles of
So
government.
would you want to see a return to the old boards of education, local community boards?
Heck no. I mean, that is just disarray and confusion. But at the same time, I think parental voices have been shut out, whether it's a panel on educational policy or the CECs, the Community Education Councils. They need more engagement and more support. And frankly, I will be, if I'm successful in November, appointing those members. So I have a stake in that too. But also having 2 kids in schools here in Manhattan, it's a personal issue as well.
So another issue that's raising its furry little head in Albany and in what the potential for next year's gubernatorial race is bail reform. President Trump has talked about federal legislation to end cashless bail. Elise Stefanik, who wants to run against Kathy Hochul, has also talked about writing the legislation to end cashless bail. The ball's now in your court as a state senator, and until you get elected, you still are chairman of the Judiciary Committee, so it's your issue. So go on, your choice.
Well, we stand by the criminal justice reforms in 2019. All you have to do is think about Khalif Browder and what that young man endured, being years in Rikers without a jury hearing. That is despicable and stands for everything that we should be opposed to in our criminal justice system. That said, we've made amendments to the bail laws 3 times. And I think we're at a place now where you look at the statistics and you see that we did the right thing morally, and at the same time, crime has dropped. Do we need more changes? I think if we look at data, the legislature will look at that responsibly.
I guess the reason I'm asking the question is this. Given the fact that it's clear to be an issue in next year's gubernatorial race, whether you think that more changes are needed, because when you take a look at the arguments made by the Republicans, they point to a number of people who have been released without bail, and while they're out on bail commit other crimes, and all of those tend to be high-profile crimes that seem to be getting a lot of attention. So do you think the criticism is justified, not justified? Your reaction?
I think the criticism is certainly justifiable when a judge could have determined something otherwise. It is largely within the judge's discretion. But I hear about addiction. I hear about people shooting up in public. I hear about menacing on the subway system. Those aren't bail related as much as they are quality of life crimes. I give credit to the commissioner for launching a quality of life initiative, and that's what my constituents are alarmed about. Bail has dropped down the list of concerns among regular New Yorkers, although it's the front page of the tabloids remains.
So what do you want to do about quality of life?
Well,
should we be, throwing people in jail for quality of life violations? What should we be doing?
We shouldn't be throwing them in jail for quality of life violations, but we should be getting people who are clearly addicted on the streets of New York City, hopeless and helpless, into treatment. And we have to direct them into treatment, even if they don't want to go at times, because we are a society that needs to care after the most vulnerable. And I see it, Marcia, on my own block. And it's worse when my 7-year-old sees it.
Yeah, I can imagine. So I know another bill that you've shepherded through Albany is the medical aid in dying bill. It's passed, but where do we go in terms of the governor deciding to sign it?
Well, it is a landmark bill for New York, but 11 states already have medical aid in dying, and the District of Columbia. So I hope the governor embraces it and signs the bill, because it has every safeguard that has been proven over the last several decades to make sure that people who are mentally competent and have a terminal diagnosis of 6 months or fewer get to end their lives with dignity and planning. And that's really what medical aid in dying is about. It's not about ending your life, it's about shortening your death when you have such a diagnosis, which is traumatic in any instance.
So how do you feel about the debate that's going on in New York now about redistricting, and the fact that Texas wants to redistrict to pick up 5 Republican seats, get rid of Democrats, and New York wants to do something, but you can't do it because of our laws for several years, because of the way it has to be going through our Constitution. Good idea, bad idea? Should we stand up to them? Should we try to do something? What should we do?
Well, I think it's a good idea. Fight fire with fire, especially at this moment. But we can fight fire within the confines of our state constitution. So the proposal that's been put forward by Senator Gianaris and Assemblymember Lasher, I think, is a very smart one, and one that I think we can activate when we see what happens in the other states, including, of course, Texas and Missouri.
So the last topic I'd like to talk to you about has to do with legal cannabis shops and the fact that 162 of them statewide say they may be in danger of losing their licenses because the law was read wrong, and they were supposed to be 500 feet from either a school or a house of worship, but they did it from the door, and apparently it has to be from the property line.
Yeah.
How do you feel about that? What's the solution?
Well, I think they need to provide relief to these applicants, many of whom...
I mean, they were legal.
They were legal, and many of whom have mortgaged their futures based on a bureaucratic bumbling, which they had no control over. I've had constituents come to me with this very same problem. Somebody's life savings could be wiped out due to this bureaucratic error.
What's the solution? Should there be a law passed by the legislature to grandfather them in, or do you just, what the state's proposal now is just to not rule on their license renewal applications, which does not satisfy the store owners?
I think the former. I think they need relief. I think it's only fair.
Just grandfather them in.
When you rely on a government expert and put your own personal wealth on the line, you should get relief from government, in my opinion. I think that's the common sense approach.
You think there's going to be a special session to deal with it?
Well, there might be a special session to deal with a lot of things, including what's coming out of Washington, but I hope it's on the table because the anguish that I've heard from some of my constituents is really heartbreaking.
Brad Hoylman-Sigal, thank you for joining me. Thank you at home for joining us as well.